Hey guys, it's Mike from the Comic Book Trove. Welcome to another Omnibus video review. Today I'm going to be taking a look through The Incredible Hulk by Peter David, Volume 2. Last week I took a look through Volume 1, so feel free to check that out if you're interested. I've recently just been rereading through this run, so I just completed rereading Volume 1 when I did that review. I'm about halfway through rereading this book. But I figured it's, I just wanted to keep these reviews going for this series, especially given that as of the time of this recording, we should be getting Volume 3 in about 2 or 3 weeks, I think, in the middle of May. That's set to come out as it stands. So definitely looking forward to adding that to the collection when it's out, and I'll definitely get a video up on that as well to showcase it when it comes in. But anyway, today, let's just take a look through this book. So, continuation, exactly where Volume 1 leaves off. I jumped right into this volume and picks up right from there. So in here you get The Incredible Hulk issues 369 to 400, annuals 16 to 18, X Factor 76, that's a crossover with X Factor, which Peter David was also writing at this time, and material from Marvel Holiday Special number 2. So basically all written by Peter David with some other contributions by the writers, and the main art in here as well is by Dale Keown. I think I mentioned in the first video on Volume 1 that Dale Keown, I would have to say, probably my favourite artist who worked on Hulk during Peter David's run as a writer. It's definitely between him and Gary Frank, and we'll see a lot of Gary Frank's work in Volume 3. But anyway, without further ado, if we take a look through the book, I've got to say that I think this is cool. This image on the book itself under the dust jacket, once you take that off, you get this kind of snarling Hulk face. A Hulk that's looking quite different to how you would probably typically see the Hulk drawn. There is a reason for that, and I will go into that, so worth saying already at this point. As with my other main reviews, this will contain spoilers. I'm going to show a lot of the book, not everything, because I don't have time for that, frankly. You can get the back of the Hulk's head on here. It makes me smile every time. But yeah, so this is a spoiler review. I'm going to discuss things in a fair amount of detail, not extensively, but if you don't know anything about this run or you don't know much and you want to read it for yourself, which I definitely recommend, by the way, if you haven't read it, it is something well worth reading, and like anything really, if you've got any interest in it, I suppose the best way to read it is without knowing everything going in. But if you don't care about spoilers or you're familiar with this run already, yeah, stick around. But if you don't want to watch any more, I will just say that, yeah, if you haven't read this run, it definitely gets my seal of approval for whatever that's worth. Yeah, so let's jump in. So, in the last review, I definitely did mention the fact that a key theme and focus of Peter David whilst he was writing this book, this whole run for the Hulk, is that he focused strongly on the psychology of Bruce Banner and the Hulk, and the psychological relationship between them two. And that really comes into focus even more sharply in here than it did in Volume 1. And it has a very direct impact on the version of the Hulk that we see just a few issues into this book. At the start of this run, for about the first 7 or 8 issues, we're still with the Grey Hulk, as was throughout Volume 1. So this is very much the tail end of kind of that, the whole Grey Hulk era. But yeah, so you go in, and straight away though, you do have at this point Dale Keown's art, and I really like the way that he draws the Hulk and everything else, just for that matter. He's just got this really kind of, almost reminds me a little bit of John Byrne. The way John Byrne drew in the 80s on X-Men, Fantastic Four. He's got a style that's similar to that. It's a little bit more cartoony though. I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's a little bit more animated. Sometimes John Byrne's art, as much as I love John Byrne's artwork, sometimes things look a little bit stiff when Byrne draws it. But I think that everyone looks quite animated. It sequentially, panel to panel, things have a very nice flow when drawn by Dale Keown. And I'm not going to discuss every issue in detail. I think I probably say this just about every time I do a video, but for the most part, I'm just going to discuss some key plot points as I get to them through the book. This is, the thing about the annuals, that all the annuals are collected in here and in other omnibus. I don't know, for me, generally speaking, I don't tend to have much interest in the annuals. Maybe that's kind of blasphemous to anybody who loves reading annuals, but whenever I find I'm reading a book like this that contains a long run and I get to an annual, which is usually an unrelated one-off story by, sometimes even a different writer and artist, well, usually always a different artist, and a story that is at most very loosely connected to what's going on in the main series at that time. I just kind of want to zoom through it. I don't necessarily skip it, but quite often I just skim read them to get to the main story again, because I just want to keep going, especially when it's something as good as this. I just find that I want to keep reading. It's got me hooked as to what happens next. You get the same kind of things throughout this volume as you get in volume 1. So Peter David still very much nailing character development, characterization. I love the way he writes the Hulk, especially the Grey Hulk. He's got a very good way with humor. He injects just the right amount of comedy for me to make the stories, light and fun, without becoming pure comedy. So things are still definitely serious at times when they need to be, but never, I don't think, can it be said that Peter David would shy away from an opportunity to work in a few jokes whenever he had the opportunity to do so. And for me, that works. He manages to strike that balance, which is quite tricky to do, to strike a balance between serious storytelling and comedy, I suppose. This is a cool issue here, though, where there's a reunion, Defenders reunion to an extent. You get Doctor Strange, Hulk, and Namor the Submariner coming back together for a couple of issues. It's pretty much the whole original Defenders lineup, I think, minus the Silver Surfer. And during this storyline, basically some kind of evil, demonic spirit entity thing is attempting to take possession of the Hulk and to take over his mind and body. So this creature is fighting Namor and Doctor Strange in the kind of real world, the physical world, and psychologically within the Hulk's mind, he's fighting Bruce Banner as well in kind of mental form, however you want to describe it. Also, this is an interesting bit. You get Betty Banner, Bruce Banner's wife, formerly Betty Ross, has become a nun, which is quite a funny reveal when Bruce Banner discovers that. But basically, she's kind of, because you got to remember, for quite a long time now, for about I don't even know, 20 or 30 issues, I think, the most of the world, including Betty, has thought that Bruce and the Hulk were dead, because he was just laying low in Vegas in the Mr. Fix-It persona. Very few people actually knew that the Hulk was alive, but during this time he's abandoned that Joe Fix-It persona. He's kind of coming back into the world, and people are discovering that he is in fact still around. This scene, quite a disturbing one. This is where things start to get a little complicated in the old psychological aspect of Banner and the Hulk. So at this point, briefly, there is Bruce Banner, there's the Grey Hulk, and there is the newly re-emerged Green Hulk. So things are really starting to get quite complicated. And it kind of, the way that David writes it, it's all basically coming down to different aspects of Bruce Banner's personality. So Bruce Banner is kind of the shy, repressed, emotionally repressed aspect of his personality. The Green Hulk, or the Savage Hulk, is the kind of embodiment of the pure rage, anger, frustration. And the Grey Hulk is kind of like his, I suppose, just what you could call darker desires, or maybe just more natural desires to an extent. His jealousies, his greed sometimes, The Grey Hulk is kind of, if Bruce Banner didn't force himself to be as extremely repressed as he is through fear of emotion, his emotions getting out of hand, which is explained as coming down to the fact that he had an abusive father, and that kind of basically traumatized him for life, and he's been terrified of ever getting too angry or too emotional unless he, end up turning out to be like his father. And this is a brief summary. I'm skating over some of the details here, if not all the details, because it is actually written quite well, I think. Which you think these kinds of mature themes. We're talking about child abuse, emotional repression, and the impact that has on a relationship, on Bruce Banner's romantic relationships, and specifically his marriage with Betty here. These are quite mature themes, and to have them written well into a comic book, I think it just kind of shows, not that I needed convincing, not that anybody who's watching this particularly needs convincing, that comics are definitely capable of mature storytelling and genuinely good storytelling, the likes of which I think there are still to this day many people who aren't comic book readers or who've read very few comic books, who just aren't aware of how capable comic book storytelling can be at telling, stories that aren't literally just superhero slugfests, and this all comes to a head in here. This kind of psychological dissonance, this conflict that Bruce Banner has within his own mind between him and the grey and green Hulk that are now back, and all the three of them are kind of, those three personas are kind of fighting for dominance. You get a cool Super Skrull appearance here. It's actually a cool two-part story where Skrulls are basically taking over a whole town, real invasion of the body snatchers type stuff. Rick Jones as well, heavily involved at this point, supporting character who'd been around since the Silver Age, since pretty much right from the beginning. Never liked Rick Jones really back in Silver Age comics, never really liked Rick Jones at all until I read him during this run. Marlo Chandler comes back in. She's reintroduced after only a very brief absence really. She had been introduced originally during the Vegas era, Joe Fixit, as a romantic interest for the Hulk. She comes back now. Turns out she's now Rick Jones's girlfriend. Right around the time Rick Jones is reunited with Bruce and Betty. And spoiler alert, that causes a bit of immediate tension, conflict in this scene, in fact, where Rick has basically brought Betty and Bruce, brought them out to meet his girlfriend. Unbeknownst to any of them, Marlo walks in, she recognises Bruce, Bruce recognises her. Rick and Betty are confused. How do these two know each other? Betty's jealous, and the whole soap opera aspect of this is really kicking into gear during that scene and these few issues. And it's right about here. There's a fight. I really like how this is drawn by Keown. The storytelling here is great. So you see kind of two representations of this fight. You see the Hulk fighting the Green Hulk. Well, the Banner is not too easy to explain, but when you're reading it, believe me, it's good. So it's Banner, Hulk, Grey Hulk and Green Hulk all kind of fighting and arguing. Within Banner's mind, that is the three of them separately fighting. In reality, as we see here, as it actually is, it is basically Banner, the Grey Hulk and the Green Hulk transforming between each other constantly. And to all intents and purposes, it looks to everybody else like some kind of weird mutant monster is killing itself, is choking itself, punching itself. And I really like the parallel as to how it's drawn, so that we see kind of how it is for the three of them and how it is for everyone else. That's probably a pretty terrible explanation of what's going on there, but basically it comes to a head here with this issue. This is really the key issue, I suppose. If we're going to pick out one issue that's the most significant issue in this book for the impact it has on the series, it's got to be 377, where Doc Samson comes in. Doc Samson is a psychiatrist, for anyone who doesn't know, and basically, as of this issue, there is a huge change in the status quo of the Hulk, which stays constant for a few, I think probably about 3 or 4 years real time after this, which equates to about 50-ish issues. And it's a very interesting kind of exploration of the Hulk's mind. Again, it focuses strongly on Bruce's father, his abusive father, who is represented in this story as this monster. And as of the end of this issue, Bruce has a kind of breakthrough where he realizes his dad wasn't an actual monster. He was just a man, just a pathetic man who needed to abuse his wife and son, and that he didn't have any reason to be afraid of him. Basically, there's no reason to be afraid of this memory of his dad. And basically what ends up happening is the 3 personas, the 2 Hulks and Banner, are able to merge together basically and create this new kind of amalgamation of all 3, and you get the new smart Hulk, or Professor Hulk. And really this is where the smart Professor Hulk from Avengers Endgame first came into play. So what you now have in this series as of this point is the Hulk as it's the Green Hulk, but he's got the mind and intelligence of Bruce Banner, but he's also got personality aspects from the other Hulks. So it's not just Bruce Banner, kind of mild-mannered, emotionally repressed Bruce Banner with the Hulk's body. It's a kind of a new version, personality-wise, of Bruce Banner as well. So he is himself, but he's also now got more confidence. He's far more able to express himself, and this is a really, really fun time in the Hulk series. So from this point onwards, so this is issue 377, 378, up until around about 426 or 7, I think, when we see another change in the Hulk. For those intervening issues, I think this is probably my favourite era of Hulk, full stop. So that's going to be what's collected in here, and what's collected in what will be collected in volume 3 when that's out. So between volume 2 and 3, for me, that's the best Hulk material I think I've ever read, for just quality storytelling that is genuinely fun throughout, with a good amount of character work and funny elements to it. And the highlight for me is the introduction of this secret organization, really, called the Pantheon, who come into play here, and they recruit the Hulk, recruit Banner, Banner, Hulk. The 2 are basically interchangeable terms for the same person at this point. And they are a secret organization of kind of super beings. Their goal is to covertly make the world a better place by sort of monitoring situations with governments around the world, and wherever they find something kind of kicking off, where something's going wrong, they send a crew in and try and intervene. They have a secret base within a kind of giant mountain called the Mount, aptly enough, and in there they've got not only their key team members, but they also house a large population of civilians, men, women and children who they've kind of saved from war-torn countries or other terrible situations. They give them food, shelter, schools, everything they need, really. These people are looked after, everybody's genuinely happy there, and it really all kind of seems like a really great place. And for a long time it just kind of was that. Normally when these things come along, it's kind of like, oh, it's too good to be true. And although there definitely turned out to be a couple of shady secrets, and spoiler alert, it does end up kind of falling apart, the crux of what the Pantheon is, it was genuinely a good thing for the most part, and most of the members of the team are genuinely good people. And it was just kind of refreshing to see during these issues, new characters, new organization introduced that is, for the most part, genuinely good. If some of their methods are maybe a little extreme, the line between good and evil is kind of blurred. Well, evil's not really the word, but it is what they do. They've got good intentions. How they do things is potentially a little more morally grey. But yeah, it's a cool set of characters, cast of characters that all bring something good to the series. There's conflict basically now a whole new conflict between Bruce and Betty, because she is struggling to accept this new version of her husband, which is understandable because he's gone from being a normal human to basically being an intelligent Hulk. Her husband is now 3 times the size of a normal guy, and doesn't change back. Obviously, a difficult adjustment. A couple of crossovers here with the Infinity Gauntlet event, which really don't tie into the event that much. It's a very indirect tie-in. Sometimes you get tie-ins with events that really don't work very well if you don't read the event as well, or if you haven't read the event. That's really not an issue here. I've read Infinity Gauntlet a bunch of times, but on my most recent read through, I didn't read it alongside this, and I can tell you now, even if I hadn't read Infinity Gauntlet, it really doesn't matter at all. It's very minimal, the extent to which it ties in. Basically, the only real thing that happens is half the population disappears briefly, which obviously comes as the result of Thanos' snap. But at this point in time, this is such a famous event and occurrence because of the Infinity War film. Probably everybody knows about that, even if you haven't read Infinity Gauntlet. So yeah, as I look through this, I kind of just admire and enjoy Dale Keown's work as I read through this, as I flick through it now. I've got my little makeshift scrap of paper bookmark here. Just literally grabbed the first thing when I was reading through it last time round. I had to stop reading all of a sudden, so I just grabbed a bit of paper there. So that's just my wonderful way of making a bookmark. Patent pending. And you get, just further development going through here, where the Hulk is becoming more involved directly with the Pantheon. He becomes an active member of that team. Interaction with the Mole Man there. Mole Man's just one of those. He's the original supervillain, isn't he? He first appeared in Fantastic Four #1. So the Mole Man is as old as the Fantastic Four. He's the OG Marvel supervillain. The developing relationship as well. Right? The kind of soap opera aspect of the Hulk during this time really reminds me of Silver Age Spider-Man. With Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane, Harry Osborn, Flash Thompson. The focus that splits so kind of evenly between Spider-Man's heroics and Peter Parker's personal life became a template really for a lot of comics, but it really, I'd say, strongly influenced Peter David in the way he does this, because there really is a great amount of focus on both. And I think the best stories when it comes to superhero comics are the ones that do that and do it well. Because quite frankly, as much as we all probably like a good superhero with supervillain fight, with things just being thrown around and destroyed on a huge scale, what makes these stories relatable, what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and other, early creators all managed to figure out, was that these superhero stories work best when you make them relatable and you add in, human elements to it, which definitely happens throughout this run. It stands out. And then you've also got crazy 90s nonsense, like the Hulk wearing ammo strapped all around him with massive guns, and something that reminds you of, and something Rob Liefeld would draw. You get it all in here. You get everything. You get the pure 90s craziness, but with genuinely good stuff as well. Here's that X Factor crossover Who's the artist on this X Factor series? X Factor is getting, this X Factor run by Peter David is getting an omnibus this year as well. And I'm not sure yet if I'm going to get that, because I'm just not sure. I don't know, maybe tell me if I should, but I haven't really read it. I suppose it's a no-brainer that I should try it, because if I love Peter David's Hulk, I suppose theoretically I should like his work at the same time on X Factor. Tom Rainey, the artist. I wanted to check that just because I don't really like it. Spoiler, sorry about that. But yeah, I just want to kind of see who's doing that, because to go from Dale Keown's work to flick through this all of a sudden, it just looked way worse. I couldn't remember who drew it. And I'm sorry to any fans of his artwork. I'm not saying it's atrocious, but I just think it looks kind of weird. It's just something off about it that I can't quite put my finger on it. But this story though is a cool story. It's, if I remember rightly, it's been a while since I read it now, but it is kind of like what I mentioned earlier, where the Pantheon has gone into this kind of like Middle Eastern type thing. So it's clearly something that's based on the sort of problems that have been present in the Middle East for a long time. War-torn countries, dictatorships, corrupt governments. The Pantheon's gone in and they're trying to destabilise the government. X Factor's gone in because I think they've been sent in as official representatives of the US to stop the Pantheon, because they want to make sure things are done more diplomatically, and the Pantheon are kind of seen as being more like terrorists in their rogue approach to it. This was the cover to the DM variant of the Dust Jacket, by the way. So this was the standard edition cover, which I think is really cool anyway, but that was the DM version. I know a lot of people prefer that, went for that one. I think this book is out of print as well, which sucks, you know, and I'm not showing this off to rub that in the wound, rub salt in the wound or anything, for anyone who wants to get it. So I don't want anyone to think that, but it's a book that will hopefully come back into print. You know, Marvel have been doing much better at reprinting popular books. You've got to think, when something sells out and goes out of print as quickly as this book did. I mean, it only came out about 6 months ago, maybe a bit more than that. But anyway, you'd like to think that someone in their collected editions department is paying attention to that sort of thing and making a note, because if it sells out that quickly, you'd think it's a no-brainer to bring it back into print quickly and let it sell a bunch more. But, you know, what do I know? I'm just some guy. I think this is part of a Hulk annual as well. Yeah. Got a history of the Hulk type thing, this, up to that point. And then back to the main thing. Not Dale Keown though here. A guest artist to come in. And, you know, it's just so noticeable when you get an artist like Keown, who brings some spectacular artwork to a series. You always notice it that much more when you have a fill-in artist come in who's just not quite on that same level. And again, this is another artist here. You've got the artist changing every few pages as you flick through this part of the book. When you get to the end of this book though, the final storyline, story arc that's collected in here is quite an interesting one. Basically, Rick Jones's long lost mum. Rick Jones always believed himself to be an orphan, and towards the end of here, this woman claiming to be his mum shows up, seemingly out of nowhere. Somewhere around here, I think. There's a brief return to Mr. Fix-It here. I think he goes back to Vegas to do kind of one last favour. Returns as Mr. Fix-It. meets up with the Punisher, and I'm going to say now I'm not a huge Punisher fan, and I know there are people who love reading the Punisher, and I'm not putting down every Punisher story out there. I've by no means read them all, but I don't know, the whole concept of the Punisher is not one I've ever really just bought into that much. But as I said, I haven't read a whole lot, so don't take that as some kind of personal insult if you're a big Punisher fan. Maybe just suggest something to me that I should read to change my mind, you know? I'm always open to suggestions. Never claim my opinion is the right one at the end of the day. And I'm always willing to change my opinion. You know, there's runs I've disliked and I've read them again at some point and realised actually they're much better than I thought, and vice versa. But this one was one that I always loved. You know, as soon as I read through this, it hooked me straight away. Read through the whole thing so quickly. Back to Dale Keown at this point. And yeah, this is her. So this is the woman claiming to be Rick Jones's mum. Basically, she's not a stable person. It turns out she's not his mum. She's been doing this same kind of scheme to a lot of other young men, and we see that here. Basically, Rick Jones has been locked up in the basement next to some very unfortunate souls who are basically playing his part in her, I don't know, psychopathic schemes in the past. She just goes to young men who never knew their parents. She claims to be their mum, and she ends up killing them. Betty and Marlowe go and check on her. At the same time, the leader is playing a key part here. So there's kind of two plots going on at once. You've got the Hulk taking on the leader in their latest confrontation, and then you've got this very dramatic moment where crazy fake mum kills Marlowe, and she is actually dead as well. For now, you got to always put that in with comics, you know. But a very shocking moment, a very dark panel. You know, Marlowe gets stabbed in the back by this crazy psycho with a kitchen knife, and you know, that page there, that splash page, sticks out in my mind. It's one of those that you just remember it. Betty gets into a fight with her. She gets apprehended, this crazy woman, but Marlowe is dead, and Rick Jones does not take it well. Understandably, he's distraught. He goes to Doctor Strange, demanding he do some kind of magic to bring her back from the dead. When Strange says that he can't do that, that's not how his magic works. Rick Jones kind of loses it again. And this all culminates with basically, if I remember rightly, because it's been a while, I've not got to this bit of the book to reread it yet. But the leader kind of says he can bring her back. I think the leader gets in touch with Rick, and he says, "Look, I can do it." Rick goes through to all the heroes. He goes to Doctor Strange. He goes to the Fantastic Four. Goes to the Avengers first, asking all of them for help. All they basically say to him is, we can't. It's unfortunately, death is a part of life. You've got to accept it. Try to move on. We're here for you, but we can't do anything for her. He doesn't like those answers, so he ends up turning to the leader, who offers a solution in his own way. But I don't think that the Hulk knows about that. And basically, the leader has established a kind of special society, kind of sort of locked away from the world. This is it. He's got his own facility, secret place set up where he's got a bunch of disciples and followers all following him. And he's set up Marlowe's body there in a secret lab, and she's being restored to life. At least that's the intention. At the same time, the Hulk is storming the whole place to stop the leader. And gets in there. Have I missed it? Have I managed to miss it? And yeah, I think I have. Let's go back a little bit. Yep. So around about here, Hulk stops the whole thing going down, and Marlowe has basically failed to come back to life. So at this point, Rick is kind of screaming. He's losing it with Bruce because he's just basically stopped the love of his life from being brought back to life. And it all ends there, on that kind of cliffhanger with this volume, with Bruce kind of feeling like he's betrayed his friend because he didn't know the full details of all of that was going on. Now, volume 3 will of course carry on immediately after this and carry the story on. She basically, for anyone who doesn't know, swimsuit editions. Yeah, you either like them or love them. But yeah, Marlowe, she does come back, I will say, now. So that whole thing will be covered in volume 3. Again, that's another key part of the story that I really like. And all the stuff in here is really good. And I've already been talking for what feels like ages, and I feel like I skimmed over so much of the details in there. But to reiterate what I said right at the start, if you have stayed with me this long, and as always I appreciate that if you have, this is a great run to read, and I know that this book and volume 1 are quite hard to get a hold of right now, and you probably don't want to pay the aftermarket prices, which I fully understand. But I didn't originally read this run in omnibus format. The cheapest and easiest format for me was to read it digitally. And I don't know what other physical collections are actually out there at the moment. To be fair, I don't think there are many. But Marvel Unlimited is certainly a great place to go to read this and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it's a great place to read stuff to kind of try it out before you commit to buying a big expensive book like this anyway. So yeah, even if you can't get the omnibus, my point is to just try and read it any way that you can. If you've got any trade paperback collections that you can find that have been previously released, or if you just read it digitally, it's well worth checking out, honestly. And I'm going to leave it off here before I end up talking for the rest of the day in a loop about how much I love this run. But yeah, basically when volume 3 comes out, I'm definitely going to do a video to cover that as well. So, stay tuned for that if you're interested. But other than that, thanks again for watching as always, and hopefully back soon with another video.